Okay. Guramali, Woppaburra Gappa Naginda Bondabari, Dala Garimba, Barigan Nugu Woppaburra, Dari Talabarimba, Kumpameri, Nugu, Dala Nagira, Kumpameri Gappa. Thank you for your respectful welcome earlier, Clinton Brewer. I acknowledge the Kumpameri's traditional custodians, also pay respect to our ancestors, elders, and all First Nations people present. Just want to shout out quickly, Salvi up the back there, here you go, mate. Also, Jason, I've got a couple of other countrymen in the audience. I think Mello's up there, Durrumble fella up there, and Robbie as well, one of our countrymen as well. Hi to him and other people in the room. All right, let's see how we go here. What's happening? Look, many would argue that strong research relationships are built on mutual respect with traditional custodians. I looked at my experiences in the marine environment and over the last 10 years tried to present a real quick analogy of how I've seen it, and then we'll show how our relationship has developed with AIMS over the past 5 years that I've been involved in a particular project anyway. Let's have a look. I'm just looking at time frame, so we better kick on. Yarra yadaba it's called, so we've called this because Yarra means coming together. It's usually around people or mixture of people, and yadaba means respect, so it's really like a coming together of people or relationship or partnerships with respect. All right, this is sort of how I've seen the marine environment at the moment. Now, I joined the Reef Restoration Adaptation Program that I was invited on. I'm not invited on, I sort of put in an application for it probably about 3 years ago. And when I got onto the committee, this was sort of, it wasn't said, but this was sort of the attitude was, look, it's about saving the reef. We need marine people, engineers, genetic specialists, all that sort of stuff. And look, we're scientists, we know what we're doing. I sort of looked at it and went, well, where's the people? And so I think slowly over time it's improved. And we're getting more social sciences, traditional owners into that marine science environment. So it's sort of like, carrying on from what Anthony was saying just previously, we're getting there slowly. This is the way I see it, this huge marine science system, and now we're pouring little bits of social science into it. The problem with some of these models is you pour a little bit of social science into that paint can, you shake it up, and when you look inside the can, you just still see marine science. So, you know, how does it fit in with being very relevant for people? What have we got next here? Oh, yeah, that's us, First Nations science down the bottom. So we're not even in the paint can yet. So we're separate down the bottom, but it reminds me a bit of how do we be involved? Well, we're like a subset or like a little Russian doll of you know, First Nations marine science. So we've got to get into the social science can before we can actually get into the marine science can. So we're even at a further disadvantage. It sort of reminds me a bit of a book Aileen Morton Robinson wrote about talking up to the white woman, and she says, yeah, I'm all for feminism, but it's the non-Indigenous women who have the fight, but we're actually a little subset within that. We're even more disadvantaged, and that's us down the bottom. Now, how can we get involved even in the social sciences? I say, well, we've got to be mixed into the can, right? You've got to be in the social sciences, but once again, you pour us in, you shake the can up, what are you left with? You just see social science. On the other side, that's us outside as well, but we need to be integrated, but we also need to be standalone. We need to have our identity. You've got to be able to see us within the system. So I'm saying we can integrate it both ways. This huge house here represents Bunnings. This is where you get your paint cans of marine science and social sciences. We're on the outside of Bunnings. It represents the system or the institutions that house social sciences and marine science, like research institutes, universities, that sort of thing. We're still on the outside. This is like the gas bottles on the outside of Bunnings. You've got to get to the inside and pay for it before you can go out and get the blackfellas and bring them in, you know. So we're still on the outside and we need to actually get into the main game. This is one thing we could do, some sort of mosaic. So we got First Peoples science, we got marine science, we got social sciences, and we could mix them all up, but we end up with that. And I was saying to Libby yesterday, well, it's like when you have some ice cream and you have a bit of chocolate, you know, strawberry and vanilla. You actually want to taste the chocolate sometimes. You know, you mix it all together and you get this glug of grey, you go, that's not real appealing. So we need to maintain our identities. So we can't just mix us all together, is what I'm saying there. What else we got, Lib? All right, there we are. I just want to raise a couple of things, is some of the issues we have dealing with marine scientists or different institutions, because they have to identify the right people to deal with. So they're looking for traditional owners with integrity that represent a particular country. A couple of issues we have, like this one on the right, I've called it black cladding. So you've got the outside, it looks like a black can, but you look down in through the top and it's white paint. So you get institutions, not institutions, you get companies, and you might know Barubi. They have an Aboriginal name, they have Aboriginal coating all around it, but when you look inside, it's actually a non-Indigenous company there, and it's about the money. There's another one I've just named Black Infusion. So you have an institution that wants to get the funds, but you put a couple of black fellas into the group to say, look, we're legitimate. We got Aboriginal people working for us here, usually at the lowest level or the medium or to low level, not usually at the top. The other one, which I've just invented as well, is called Blackadder. So the Rowan Atkinson sort of a reference here. So you add one important person into the mix, usually a professor or something, and say, we've just seen all of these grants in GBRF, and it says it must be TO-led. Right, we need one person at the top, stick your name on the grant, you can be out in front, but we'll do all the work. We'll just put you out as front as the token guy. Hey, it's professorial position, mate. You know, you've got to be happy with that. So these are the things, well, if it's a challenge, I guess, it's a challenge to identify the right TOs. Talk to the people on the ground, who are the traditional owners of that country. When you go to central Queensland and you want to know who Darrinbal people are, you go to Malcolm Mann. You go to Darrinbal Enterprises. You get the people, you get the elders, you get the legitimate people responsible. It's a bit more difficult when you're in an institution and you've actually got to go out and talk to those people on the ground. Was that our last one, Lib? Yeah. I just want to say, that seems a bit sort of, oh, gee, this is going to be a minefield. The thing is, when you want to develop a partnership, it's got to be done proper way. It's got to be developed genuinely with good people, with the right culture. And I think we've developed this with AIMS. So the project we did over the last 5 years, and just finished early this year, we'll have a look at that, and we'll see how our relationship has developed, not personally, but as partners, and we'll have a look, see how it goes.
Okay. Happy? Yeah, that was
great. Given time, this is like an Olympic torch bearer.
Although you're going to see this torch go back and forth quite a bit through the rest of the presentation. So I think at this forum, I think you've all seen these tiers at AIMS, because meanwhile at AIMS, we've wanted to do better in our engagement with traditional owners in the work that we do. And so we developed this tier system to govern ourselves, to control and have greater expectations of our own researchers. And so we've got the bronze, silver, gold, platinum tiers of traditional owner engagement along a spectrum from truly researcher-led through to researcher-led with a bit more traditional owner engagement, through to co-design, through to traditional owner initiated and led projects. But the important thing is that for the majority of this, and we've set some targets around where we want to be in each of these tiers, the majority of this, we've got a free, prior and informed consent process, which means that traditional owners are positioned as decision makers about what we can and can't do on their sea country. And we still go and get the right permit from the regulator following the LAW process, but in parallel we've established some internal processes to make sure that we also follow LORE and we talk to the right traditional owner group. So we were planning some work in the beautiful Keppel Islands, Woppaburra country. It was pretty clear who we had to talk to. Thankfully, there was a TUMRA in place, a traditional use of marine resource agreement with the Marine Park Authority, and a native title claim, which it more recently has become determined. So we knew we had to talk to Woppaburra. Now, that was a little bit problematic because the Woppaburra people were displaced at the beginning of the 20th century, and the majority of the Woppaburra community did not live on country. So in order to consult with them, we needed to bring them back to country. So we, as part of this project that began in 2019, we started with an on-country workshop. We brought 46 Woppaburra people to Konomie, or North Keppel Island, and there you can see the scientific objective of this project was to understand the drivers of growth and survival in a baby coral's first year of life. Because baby corals, about 95% of baby corals that settle die during that first year due to a whole range of reasons. And if we're going to develop reef restoration methods using baby corals, well, we need to make sure that more survive during that first year. So that was our kind of intention and our motivation. And so we had this workshop initially to seek free prior informed consent, like we do now, to co-design some of the locations of the study site. So this is sounding like a researcher-led project with some significant traditional owner engagement. And also explore some other ways that we could work together throughout the project, because this workshop happened at the very beginning. Okay, so trying to go to the next slide. Not sure what's happening. Would you be able to advance to... Oh, there we go. Okay, so with all new relationships with traditional owners, and bearing in mind this is really the first cab off the rank, the ink had barely dried on our beautiful tier system and the Indigenous Partnerships Plan. And so we have developed a geo-referenced metadata catalogue where we can zoom in on a map and have a look at metadata records that occur with data sets from that location. So we did that for Woppaburra, and we thought, wow, we've actually already been doing quite a lot of work. AIMS has been going for 52 years. We've been doing an awful lot of work on your sea country without engaging. And so the beginning of the workshop, the first couple of days, we spent a lot of time talking about some of these projects. And I'll give you some examples now. So one project that we're pretty proud of at AIMS is the coral coring project. These giant Porites bommies, they can be hundreds of years old, but they start off as just a little baby coral, and then each year they lay down these growth bands as they get bigger and bigger, and each growth band incorporates elements of the environment. So they're environmental history books. And so what did we do? Well, we drilled a hole and took some coral cores. And sure enough, we had several coral cores from Woppaburra Sea Country that we could talk about in our truth-telling session. Now, there's so much data and so much science has been gotten out of all of these coral cores, but here's just an example. So the light grey line is the fluorescent bands in the coral core for the top. Oh, thanks. The fluorescent bands in the coral core. And the dark black line is the river flow from the Fitzroy River, and the Keppel Islands are downstream from the Fitzroy River. You can go to the next slide, actually, and you can see that there's a really good correlation between the fluorescence and the river flow data, because all the humic material coming out of the river in that flood event gets incorporated into the coral skeleton. So we can look at that with the record of the river flow over the past, since the beginning of the 20th century, and then hindcast back to the 1600s, which is the length of that coral core. Brilliant piece of science. Look at what these Keppel Island corals have taught us about the environment. And it's not just about river flow, it's about the commencement of land clearing is captured in that core, the commencement of the use of leaded petrol with colonisation, and then the loss of lead when we went to unleaded petrol. It's all captured by that coral. But the elders particularly, and the traditional owners present, were actually not happy that we drilled a hole in the ancient 350-year-old coral. So I'm going to hand over to Harry to tell you what happened next.
Oh, this one. Yeah, so when you think about it, everything on our country is a living entity. It's part of us. So then for someone to bore a hole straight through the middle of a coral, it's sort of like, whoa, what's happening here? So our elders weren't happy, our people weren't happy about it, but in a nice sort of way, it turned around. After presenting all this, AIMS was in collaboration with Questacon, and Questacon said, we'd love to put this up as a display down in Canberra. So they started putting it together and they cut it in strips. You can see it along the bottom there. And when you put a UV light through it, you can see different time frames on it in terms of what's happened. Tanuba or the Fitzroy River, flooding. You can see introduction of leaded fuels, as Libby said, when leaded fuels stopped. You can see that clearly along that timeline. But the first draft of it, they put it up and said, this is what we've come up with, what do you think? And I looked at it, and once again, it's becoming it's like an echo. There's no people in there. It was all about the science. So I said, how about we do a parallel thing, and along the one side we do the sciences, and on another side we do our story, where we were at this time, where our people have come. So it shows our story as Woppaburra people parallel to the science in this. So it's a real sort of a co-design, and I think it's still on show down at Questacon. Yeah.
So next time you're in Canberra, drop into Questacon and have a look at the Woppaburra Coral Core. Another example of brilliant science that we were so proud of was this piece of work. It was a publication in 2006, but essentially it was an experiment that took some Woppaburra corals and transplanted them to the warmer waters of Magnetic Island, where those corals immediately bleached but recovered and subsequently were as heat tolerant as native Magnetic Island corals. And it was actually a pretty important study, because it was for the first time that this was proven to be due to the corals shuffling their symbionts to be to the more heat-tolerant strains of symbionts. And it kind of spawned a whole new era in reef restoration research, now that this mechanism of adapting to heat stress was demonstrated. So, and this is what Keppel Island corals have taught the world. But again, this particular session actually got pretty robust, because it's not okay to take coral from one person's sea country and put it into another group's sea country. It's not just culturally offensive, it's actually culturally dangerous and bad for country. And so this was discussed at length, and then it was one of the senior women, Meaghan Cummins, who wanted to be here today and present this with us. She stood up and she said, but don't you see that's our story too, because we too were taken without consent, taken to places that we didn't want to go, and we've adapted and we've demonstrated our resilience, and now we're back on country. And it was like, whoa, okay. Then over the next few days ensued the development of the Woppaburra Coral Dance. The workshop I've lost my sound. The workshop was during coral spawning, and so we spent a lot of time looking at the coral slicks and looking at the larvae behaviour down a microscope, and examining the way that as the larvae develop towards being competent to settle and become baby corals, how their behaviour changed. And this is incorporated in the coral dance. Now, Meaghan and Josh were going to be here to demonstrate this for you, but instead you're going to have some dodgy footage that I took with a phone at the time, and I hope this video works. So the first part of the dance starts with the word Woppaburra, and our dancers are bundled together in a coral spawn bundle of eggs and sperm, ready to spawn. And see if the sound might not come through, but anyway, you can see that they're in a bundle, they're looking to be ready to spawn. Then the next part of it is with the word yarn, which means go, I'm told, where they look up at the full moon, because coral spawning is cued into the full moon. So here our dancers look up, someone says yarn, and they all look up, oh, it's full moon, we really need to get ready to spawn, and then we need to go. We need to break those bundles apart, fertilise those eggs, become larvae, and start to disperse. And then the next word is yamba, which means it's time to look for home, time to look for your place. And in this part of the dance, the dancers mimic the behaviour of coral larvae when coral larvae is ready to settle and metamorphose into a coral polyp. So these baby coral larvae, they become negatively buoyant, go down to the seafloor, and they use their mouth to taste the substrate to find just the right spot to settle. So here we go, we've got yamba, we're dispersing out, and then you'll see the dancers start to feel their place where they crouch down. And they start to taste the substrate. They're going, yep, I think this is it. And then the next part is that with the word Woppaburra, it's like we found our place now, let's prepare to metamorphose. And then with the word Yarra, it's our beautiful larvae in the dance then metamorphose into coral polyps, and that's the end of the dance. So that was a pretty amazing outcome. And these words here are Meaghan's words. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's working. Here we go. Yeah, that's one of Meaghan's what would you call it, a catch cry, or she puts it on a lot of her publications, or any sort of things to do with our mob, about remembering our story, remember the removal, reflect on resilience, rejoice in the return. So it goes along a lot of our things. But the point I wanted to make here is that culture is dynamic, and some people think, Aboriginal culture, it's so many thousands of years ago, but this is an example of moving dynamic culture where a story is being told not through publications, but through dance, through song, and it's culture today. It's being developed, and this will be passed on to youth. And we're actually having a youth program in a couple of weeks, and they'll be doing these dances and singing these songs to pass on that culture.
Okay, so at that workshop we did do some other work as well. So we did some participatory mapping to co-design where the study sites should be, and more importantly where we must stay away from. And we also had some really great workshops to design into the project the ways that Woppaburra people could be involved. And we went on to have 2 more on-country workshops, one in the middle of the project during spawning again, and this one at the bottom here is at the very end of the workshop, the project earlier this year, when we came together again to report back on results and just really celebrate what we'd achieved. So over the 5 years, some really great science got done. We learned a lot about how to keep coral babies alive during the first year of life. There were 2 bleaching events, so we learnt a lot about reef resilience in the Keppel Islands and the Keppel corals. And this pink coral here is actually a new species of Woppaburra coral, which Woppaburra are going to name. They're going to give us the species name. So, we did do some great science. There was some training and employment pathways and outcomes. So on the left here is Meaghan Cummins. She was employed in the project and supported to get her Certificate 3 in aquaculture, focusing, of course, on coral aquaculture, and then was employed for the duration of the project. And I think you all know Uncle Bob Muir. He was initially employed to help us organise the on-country workshops, but we're really happy that he's now a permanent full-time employee at AIMS. He's our team elder. And there was, during the mid-project on-country workshop during spawning, we trialled a package of training for larval restoration, coral reef restoration interventions, and that work is now underpinning a 3-year training and capacity building project alongside RAP. And a whole range of cultural practices emerged as well. Do you want to talk about these?
No, you can do it.
Oh. Well, okay. So on the right there, we had this giant Apple TV and a link to a microscope and lots of coral larvae in petri dishes at different stages of development, and that's Meaghan in the foreground, designing all sorts of new choreography for that Woppaburra Coral Dance based on the larval behaviour. And then on the left here, we've got a practice that happened during that work, where at the end of the night's experiments, the women, as they created it as a women's business ceremony, they would take the leftover spawn and gently mix it in a bucket to fertilise as many eggs as possible, and then ceremoniously release it back onto the reef in front of the island. We also, during that work, we did some cryopreservation research with Taronga Conservation Society, and this ended up raising a bunch of cultural concerns about that practice, because it's the sperm or the male seed, we like to call it if there are elders present, cryopreserved, and they're living coral cells, Woppaburra coral cells, taken to the Taronga Conservation Facility in Sydney on Camaragal country. So again, it's this concern about translocation from one country to another. And so with Taronga, we organised a workshop with traditional owners down in Sydney. There was a smoking ceremony to welcome those coral cells onto Camaragal country, and the project ended up developing some new protocols amongst the traditional owners.
And the really good thing about this was there was an exchange of some of our water, some of our sands, and also when the smoking ceremony was completed, we used some of their leaves and put them in as well as like a mixing of the two. And why we did that as well was because it just happened that the Camaragal people, their totem is a humpback whale, same as ours. So it sort of worked out perfectly that we're going to another, like a sister clan, that also had, we say mugga for our humpback whale totem. So it worked out perfectly.
Okay, there was a whole bunch of relationship building, two-way learning, mutual respect developed over that 5 years, and we learnt that it does take a village to do marine science properly. I might skip this slide because I think we're running out of time. So basically, this project went way beyond the science, the marine science that we were planning to do. We have some training and employment outcomes. Reconnection to country was a really big one. Around 60 Woppaburra people were brought back onto Woppaburra country during this project, and about 60% of those people, it was their first time they'd ever been on their own country, and the impact of that was really powerful. New cultural practices, we've got a dance, we've got 2 songs, and some cultural safety protocols for biobanking, which Taronga Conservation Society are now applying elsewhere. And I learnt how to grind ochre and paint with it, and we've definitely got relationships set up for the future. And so this might be the end of the Woppaburra Coral Project for now, and it's the end of this talk, but it's definitely not the end of work that we might be doing together between AIMS and Woppaburra.